Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Today, I continue my conversation with Sai Krishna, a serial entrepreneur who calls himself the Metaverse plumber, on building organizations to realize the visions of the founders. How having a focus on small squads, which are multi-skilled and self-contained, and the ability to take risks and feedback, and what a founder's formula should be, and a key role of a founder, whether it is to make everyone happy in the team, or is it to help them realize the purpose and creating a ding world. We also talk about metaverse, whether it is hype or old wine, or is it something substantial. Some technologies like 3D printing, which showed a lot of promise, but ultimately has not seen success. We also talk about the impact of new technologies on the carbon footprint, as well as anyone looking to get deeper into the metaverse ecosystem, what they should be focusing on. And finally, I asked him whether he got into AI because AI is part of his name, and don't miss his answer. Listen on. Welcome to the Software People Stories, Sai.
Thank you so much for having me in, Chief.
As an entrepreneur, so far we've been talking about technology and then how you go understand users. You talked about the squads, but how do you build a squad? And how do you build squads? Building an organization in addition to building a product.
That's I continue to be. I'm work in progress on a huge note on that, Chief. But the one
your
thing
style.
which,
what has been your style of doing this?
Right. One thing that I have noticed is, given how fluidic some of these roles could be in their early days of figuring out what your customer wants, you're actually doing three things. You're figuring out your own role in that org. You're figuring out how your squad's supposed to operate and what success looks like at the end of month 3, month 6, and year 1. You're figuring out what your customer really wants in sort of a repeatable manner where you can actually see some success. Now, as you do all these three, you realize that the way that these squads can be built is, if I draw a 2x2 graph, you require a high degree of generalization and sort of a median degree of skill, which is, you're not going after the 10x engineer. You're not going after a person who is incredibly specialized in customer support or relationship building or business development. You're going after someone who's able to be a sponge, soak up as much information, soak in as much requests from the market as much as possible, be as observant as they can, and then be almost a hose in terms of funneling that to the rest of the org in the most palatable format, and thereby setting this up for success. So a squad for me is almost a sponge and a hose on one side, which is what gives you the chance to accumulate as much info and what gives you the chance to shape up, as we call it, as this info on the other side. So internally, we have 5-member squads. What we do is it's sort of a combination between one product manager, a couple of designers, a full stack engineer, and one generalist who sort of comes through on this. And these folks constitute a very specific initiative that they would attempt to do either in 2 weeks or in 12 weeks. Our belief is, if you can't achieve something in 12 weeks, you can't do it in 36 weeks, is it? Right? Like, if it's not scoped out in an accurate manner in that case. So how do these squads form together? We just invest in hunger, right? Like, there is no concept of being a subject matter expert when it comes to a situation like this. You simply have to have the ability or the hunger to roll up your sleeves and get out there, talk to your customers, and learn and implement what you're learning as fast as you can. So the only two variables you can really measure or invest upon here is, the first one is willingness to learn, just being fluidic. And the second one is time to feedback, or like the time to feedback resolution. which is from the time a customer has complained about something or given you some insight or given you some feedback, to how quickly does that get to be featured inside the next release is all that you're optimizing the spot for. Right? Like this could be at a marketing collateral, something as trivial as marketing collateral, to something as profound as a whole new release that is happening at an engineering level. But if your squad has the smallest time to gratification in some ways, right, between what the customer says to how your company reflects that, I think your squads are automatically set up for success there. So time to gratification and just learning ability on the other side.
So when you build these squads with your passion rubbing off and your energy also being distributed, how does it feel when you have to take an exit decision?
It's hard. I think the very nature of building a startup is on unbridled amount of optimism, right? Like you are hoping for the 1%, the 1% that this is going to be $1 billion outcome, the 1% that your customer is going to say yes, the 1% that you're going to create a category where a category might have been either difficult to create, not seemed obvious, or just seemed too difficult for people before you to have come and done. And given that you're always hoping for the fact that things will work out and work out perfectly fine, taking a smack to the face, right? Either in terms of your customer churning, your team member churning, churn is never easy. And it's really just about how much churn are you willing to live with across the board. You can't build an org where there isn't any amount of churn. Right. So as you sort of see people go through the door, either as a customer, either as an investor, or either as a team member, you are left with little a choice but to look at what you can do better over the next iteration, right? Because that bridge is pretty, more often than not, crossed, burnt, call it what you. The fact that it got there is requiring just as much introspection as the fact that whether you can save it or not at that point of time. So if there is a way, I mean, and it's never easy during the phase that it happens, we all react more from the strings at heart than the strings in the mind. Over a period of time, I think you realize that a palatable amount of this is truly what the founder can do to differentiate themselves from the pragmatic ones to the ones who are truly to the slightly more blinded ones. The pragmatic ones are able to build long-lasting orgs where it's fine. And in today's bearish market conditions, you see a lot of the companies doing these layoffs, right? So churn can actually happen on the other side, where it's induced by the founder or induced by the founding team, where you realize you still have an org to build. So even though it was of no fault of the employee, you could lay off thousands, right, at some point of time. And it's never an easy decision. Pragmatism, both at the employee as well, pragmatism both in terms of sizing up or shrinking down or losing someone at a palatable level, is almost something that you learn as a rite of passage more than anything else. Initially, you're so in love with what you're up to, it's difficult. But over a period of time, you realize it's the very act of building that you really need to be okay with this.
So how does the emotional bond with the team that you built get impacted by this?
Couple of areas. I think it's important for you as a founder to be declarative on what type of founder are you wanting to be. Right? Some founders want to be the arm around your shoulder, be truly the friend with you, right? And go on the hiking trip with you through the weekend. Some might want to appear authoritarian. Some might want to be introverted. I think we come in very different shapes and sizes. My piece to my team chief is there's a reason why all of us exist inside these walls. More than anything else, it's to do our life's most gratifying work when we look back decades down the line. If we haven't achieved that, I am doing you a disservice and vice versa. So have fun, right? First up, you really, really need to feel it from the deepest parts of your belly that you're excited about this. If you're not, we'll find a way to make this exciting for you. But have fun. Optimize for joy. I am completely open to any rule being tweaked around until a point where everybody will claim and follow through on the fact that they're having fun. And the second part from there is your job's not to be a friend. Your job's not to be just a mentor. Your job's not to be a boss. Your job's perhaps to make everyone in your team look back over a certain period of time, years down the line, and say, that phase of life is perhaps where I had the most impactful amount of work that I was able to put into the world, right? Every hour of what you do and the way that it is produced into any outcome, if I can maximize impact between all of us here inside this org, inside these walls, that's all that we need to be engineering towards. So it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a wild, jolly ride, right? And that's typically how we set ourselves up here. So You got to enjoy what you're doing, but also realize that you will never do this kind of work at any phase of life again, which is what I aspire for. So hopefully we're able to really live up to those values as we see it through.
Yeah, that's probably a good segue to get into Metaverse, I suppose.
For sure.
How much of Metaverse is hype and how much of it is old wine and how much of it is going to be practical? You talked about the 3D printer, which was supposed to revolutionize pretty much everything.
For sure.
It has seen its limitations.
And since you mentioned a 3D printer, let me use that as the example to point speculative bubbles around, right? Any new piece of technology is in some ways a speculative bubble, right? We hope that this is the next big thing, much like the internet was, or much like the smartphone was, or cloud computing was. We've gotten it right a few times. Now, each time that this has happened, there has been a healthy dose of speculation to get us here. Some might call it optimism, some might call it a builder's mindset, some might call it speculation, which is what we are in right now. The metaverse is a significant amount of speculation today as we speak, right? Like there is a lot that we leave to lore. There is a lot that we leave to the joys of the future in terms of getting it right. But a speculative bubble is almost critical for the very survival and existence of a technology. And let me explain why. The 3D printer was widely reputed to be a part of every household back in 2008, 9, 10, right? Like as the technology was in its infancy and coming through together, we all hoped and expected the concept of additive manufacturing to be something that sits in our house and we get our new phone case done from it, a new nut or a bolt that is able to be spit out from it and we're able to use it in our house. It's been about 10, 12 years and that's not happened. And it's not like 3D printing died. It found its niche or it found its use cases in medicine, industrial use cases, but it was never the grandiose vision that we had given it to be at one point. And it never had a chance because there was not enough oxygen in the room. Speculation is almost like bringing in capital oxygen, right? Which is you are allowing for a capital excess market in order to take brash, bold, and non-linear decisions that are really important for the next stage of survival of the very technology. Something like 3D printing never had access to that, which meant that it almost like a candle wax just whimpered away into oblivion or non-existence from the customer's mindset. And this speculation is found in markets where there are financial outcomes typically tied to the technology. I sell virtual land. I am able to hold a token. I am able to spend more time inside the metaverse, create a digital asset that someone else is going to buy for an eye-watering amount of money. There is financial speculation built into the instrument. And these instruments together at a technology infrastructure level give you access to so much of capital that you are able to then sit and think through what 10 years can be and actually meaningfully make progress towards getting it there. Which is what allows a company like Meta or Facebook to have an engineering workforce of over 5,500 people on Facebook Reality Labs, which is their augmented and virtual reality site, which far outnumbers WhatsApp, Instagram, Messenger, their actual money makers at any point of time. The ability for you to make these outsized punts and bets because of these speculative bubbles is what leads to the creation of nonlinear technologies in the first place. So while a lot of the metaverse is really about yoga babble right now, in terms of piecing a lot of these things together and envisioning this far distant land, I don't think that is a zero-sum negative game. I think it is really important for a technology which is as difficult as virtual and augmented reality in order to have access to that kind of capital, in order to have access to that kind of speculation and almost storytelling so that you're able to see it through to the next logical outcome of ubiquitous sort of existence between all of us. Otherwise, you risk a 3D printing situation.
So with so much of capital going in, would these solutions be affordable?
I think tech has enjoyed that more often than not, which is we found it very difficult for tech to go upstream when it comes to access, right? Like you've never had something that's become more exclusionary. You've never had something that's become more expensive, especially when the ability to make it has become easier. I would put the cost of components in a smartphone. I would put software prices. I would put access to internet at a per GB level. We've always found that after a certain maxima, it's a race to the bottom. right? A tech that is tending to a large enough cohort of people always gets commoditized, and commoditized tech always finds itself as a race to the bottom, so that the cycle then repeats, innovates, and goes out there to the next big thing. Smartphones, in a lot of ways, have taken this route, haven't they? And actually, an interesting example where you have started from an exclusive piece of accessory that is almost a Veblen good back then, right? Like it was really fashionable for you to have a smartphone, to a point where it's almost a fundamental right at this point of time. And the prices, the data that powers it, the features, the silicon, all of this over a period of time has found itself to be more accessible, both at a price point as well as a technology parity sort of perspective. And every company's smartphone is right now a rectangular brick with very little to differentiate from each other. So there's a commoditizing function to it. So I believe the metaverse is fairly similar. There will be financialization of every nook and corner of it as much as possible because of the very concept of programmable money and cryptocurrencies, etc. But over a long enough duration, when I say long enough duration, I'm talking about a decade and nothing more, you have the ability to now permeate this to a broader and broader and broader audience. And every cohort that you follow through, just from our previous conversation, is going to pay you lesser, is going to be less technically literate than the previous, and is also going to want a bunch of very different things than your previously technically sort of qualified cohort. Now, as that happens, you have no choice but to price it cheaper, innovate on your business models, go to a commodity play, and find ways of monetizing which are beyond the obvious. And by very definition of scale, technology sort of implodes on itself, where it can't be an exclusionary product as compared to being something that is accessible and mostly operates at a planetary sort of system where it's a race to the bottom and everyone can use it.
What about the impact of all these technologies or solutions that are there or likely to come up on the carbon footprint?
Today, we are at this phase where I would put it as three phases again: oblivious, brash, and corrective. The first phase is there's just so much to build. We have no clue. Nobody really even knows what's going to happen on a carbon footprint with something which is a new piece of technology.
At least there's a power that is needed for blockchain.
Right.
We typically say that, no? Yeah.
For sure. And the earliest of days is you're just oblivious to this very fact that something like this needs to be taken into consideration. The second phase is you're very brash about it, which is the growth and the financial levers and your biased interest towards them completely blind you from the very sustainability sort of narrative to the scheme of things, which is the phase we are in today, where blockchain companies and chains by themselves, by their consensus mechanisms, as well as how they are able to operate, are very brash. They are incredibly energy intensive and require a significant amount of compute in order to just do the most basic tasks. We'll go from the phase of brash to the phase of corrective, right? And because we've made this error, I think you would sort of start seeing undoing of a lot of these through architectural changes with respect to how chains work, scaling solutions, and L2s which operate on zero knowledge proofs. This is an error that was caused by us, by all means, right? And you then go from brash to saying, okay, that's not great. Let me find a way in order to undo a lot of the things that are present here. But the reason why they were brash is because you got to get this to orbit. You got to get this to escape velocity as quick as possible. You then make the corrections, where the apology is always easier than the permission. So I think we've gotten permission less in terms of the carbon footprint, and it's now like an issue that's really concerning. You then bring it back with the scaling solutions and and sort of your L2s and other things in order to make these carbon neutral, or some are even saying carbon positive in some ways than the other. And most technologies might take this sort of same amount of a path forward.
When it comes to one of my questions that I usually like to close our conversations with in terms of career advice or guidance, how exciting or how risky is it to get into the metaverse ecosystem for two segments of people? Now, one, those who've been in, let's say, more traditional, probably on the technical side, or there are also people who've been doing more of applications and in their mid-career. The other is people who are now considering getting into tech.
That's an interesting one, Chief. I think the very act of building is in a lot of ways going to teach you more than being on the sidelines. So the first step is to perhaps look at what you are optimizing for. If you are optimizing for purely financial gains and you're optimizing for the easiest way to realize X number of dollars, there are actually easier ways to do that than building a company is probably the hardest path to wealth creation. So it's step one is to understand what variables are you optimizing for. Is it wealth? Is it the joy of learning? Is it being a part of a cool new space? Or is it solving a certain problem that you think has impacted you personally, or it's an itch that you wish to scratch? As you go about this, the reasons for you to remain in a space have to be both intrinsic as well as market, which is the best combination is where you have a reason to stick around in a certain space: healthcare, education, financial inclusion. There should be a reason in ways or the other for you to help resonate at least with the problem statement. The second is the market also needs to be conducive enough for it to yank you into a certain direction as you're going about. And as this happens, the very act of building needs to be something that you find joyous, right? And you find gratifying. So before you get started, just ask yourself, would you have fun seeing this through as a decades-long journey, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week? And if that answer is yes, honestly, the rest figures itself out. The very act of longevity in venture building means that you have compounding ability of like accumulating value. If you start from the mindset of making money, it's usually going to be disastrous, right? Like if you start from the point of just staying in the game long enough till there is an outcome that you're super happy with in terms of impact that you've created, the wealth is a byproduct that just happens, like irrespective. So in this one, I would think, how long are you willing to stay in the arena for? Would you have fun while you're doing that? What is the reason why you wish to even do this in the first place? And can you cobble together a bunch of people around you who are as lunatic as you are in order to go do this for the next 10 years? If these four stack up, I think the concept of building something is just the most interesting pursuit you could do, especially if you're in your early 20s.
That was a wonderful conversation, Sai. And I don't know if I will include this, but this is one question I had to ask. Did you get into all this because AI is in your name? I'm sure somebody would have asked you earlier.
No, sir. I think I was the farthest when it comes to knowing my computer skills well enough. While I have always had a profound respect for AI researchers and developers, I knew that's a skill I couldn't pick. So I was more a pitch deck maker and a storyteller who sort of meandered and made his way through to being a designer at times and a developer very few times in order to get my products together. So the AI in the name is more to mislead you into believing that I was anywhere proficient as my friends were in terms of getting this together. But since that time, I think I used to run with this name called SciTech, which was in college, because the only thing that I used to obsess about was tech optimism, right? Like it's just lovely to exist in the world of tech. So I've always had a lot of fascination towards technology. I wish my coding abilities were as good as my fascination towards it. So the AI stops with just the name and nothing more than that. But thank you so much, Chief. You've just been, this has been some of the best exchanges in terms of org building. So thank you so much for having me in on this one. I've just had a lot of fun going about the points.
Yeah, me too. I'm sure the listeners will also have a lot of things to pick up from. Thanks, Sai.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All the best.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.